what does living in the flow mean? To me, living in the flow means two things. The connection to what you are, so this beingness, this nothingness, and simultaneously being authentically yourself on the human level. So it certainly doesn't mean being enlightened on the human level, because to me, the human never becomes enlightened. It's a great disappointment. You get this far, you go in your little car, you're like driving down the highway towards enlightenment, and you're just about to get there, you're just about to make it, and then you realize that the person doesn't become enlightened. What often happens along the way is you clear up a lot of dynamics, but that is going to be an endless expansion, your dynamics. And it's so important, the recognition of that. It's taking me years and years of integrating this to realize the importance of it, and going through periods of denial of the human stuff. Because it's so easy when you recognize who you are to go right into the absolute, and that's heaven. It's so beautiful, and it seems like that's appropriate to go through periods of like really resting in that. But then you have to integrate that with the human side, and that to me is being in the flow. So it's like being authentically human, and then also connected and knowing deeply that you aren't human. Who you are is everything, is life itself, is this no-thingness appearing as everything. This empty looking, the I amness, whatever you feel comfortable with saying. I really don't care anymore what words we use to describe it. And this isn't an effort. It's not somebody's effort to be authentically themselves, to stay in presence. It's this natural flow. So I would say that at some point there has to be some form of an energetic shift, but sometimes that is visible and sometimes it isn't. And the reason that it isn't visible to people, this energetic shift, is because what happens is that they expand over years, and so they don't feel that shift from being contracted to expansive. So it's this expansion and this deep seeing that who you are and what you are is everywhere and everything. You are this. You are what is. So that which is looking now is the looked at. So the subject and the object are one and the same thing. That which is experiencing is the experience. So this, and there's also this beingness, this sense of I amness, not I am Lisa or I am something, I am angry or I am sad. Not I am as something you can see. I am as this sense of existence, this alive presence, like this is. So this sense of presence and this empty looking, and it not being contained inside the body. It is everywhere. So it's the walls, it's the blind, and it's also unnameable. Like, so the experiencer isn't able to know things or to name things in time. It's experiencing beyond time, beyond words, beyond what's thought. It's here experiencing prior to all of that. And who you are doesn't care. Who you truly are doesn't care about anything that happens in the flow. Anything. The worst and the best things. It doesn't have any objective. It's not sitting there and thinking, I want to recognize myself, or I want to be free, or I want life to be goodness, or life to be this place of paradise. It's just experiencing itself, expanded and full and whole and free, with no objective, no reason, no motive. It just doesn't care, but not in an uncaring way, just without caring or not caring. It just is there, vibrant, alive, conscious, and this sense of being. And that's the same which is looking through everything. So, like namaste means I see God in you, and that is the God element. You could say everything is the God element because everything's made up of it, but it's like that is the God element. That is what never changes. Everything else changes, but that never changes. And that is in everything. In everything. That is in everything, baby. Boop, 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 boop. And that is also no thing. It's not contained in one thing. You could call it love, but unconditioned love. It's not like, I'm only going to love you if you're a good boy or a good girl. I'm not going to love you if you do this or that. It just loves. Its essence is love, which isn't something that you on the human level can comprehend. It just is love. And then on the other side, you've got the human. And that's the conditions, the genetics, and the conditions and the genetics. And every human is unique to their particular conditions. And there isn't, to me, there isn't enlightened behavior. There can be more enlightened behavior if you use like the word enlightenment as meaning like more free behavior on the human level. But there isn't something which is called, this is a free person. So the person is always going to be bound to its habits and its conditions, but these habits and conditions can become more free the more they're worked with, particularly when the self, the big self, is recognized. In that combination, the big self, and then working on the personal self, this combination, the personal self can become more free. And most of you have experienced that, I'm sure, from many years of the spiritual path, psychology, learning, understanding. You've become more and more free on the human level. But it works to become more free on the human level. I find it really most of the time has to be done in combination with waking up to your true nature, because otherwise you can only go to a certain place in becoming free on the human level. Like, you really have to understand that the human isn't your fault, that you're not guilty, that the human is a play happening in who you are. It's as impersonal as the wall appearing now, as the air appearing, as the sun appearing. It's something that is happening. But most people are caught in so much guilt and shame and victimization that they can't see that that isn't who they are. So there has to me, that has to be a combination. You can work on yourself to an extent, but I always found that working on myself was limited without this knowledge of who you were. And it also, just working on yourself without the knowledge of who you are, it can just increase mind activity. Some psychologists and some people that you work with, body workers, are really good at getting you in your body and out of your mind. But a lot of the time it's very mental, like you're mentally working out yourself and you're mentally trying to do creative experiences. But some workers now do integrate a lot of presence, a lot of body work. So, and then what happens over time, like so you have this awakening to who you truly are, and then the personality begins to become more smooth, and then you begin to experience more of the day or more of the time in flow. And what flow means is being authentically yourself on the human level while being connected to who you truly are, to God, your God nature. And being authentically yourself can be screaming and crying in pain. You know, if your dog dies, or you know, like something tragic happens, or you're watching a TV program that's very disturbing. So it doesn't need to look like something, like someone being like, we like that image because we like the idea, this energy of seeking likes the idea that one day I'm going to become this like Buddha with folded legs that never has any negative emotions and is always like in peace and in bliss. So we like that idea, but the peace and the bliss is prior to the person. And when that's really recognized, then that is kind of there in all experiences, including the negative ones. So I know a lot of people contradict me on this, but hey, what to do? You have to go with your flow. Like, a lot of people talk about becoming this like place of being a perfect Buddha on the human level. So to me, being the perfect Buddha on the human level is being authentically yourself. And that also includes looking at your dynamics. You know, so being really deep in your dynamics. So really knowing what the basis of your feelings are. So, you know, so say if somebody does something which is scary to you, and then you come up with aggression back, you become a bit aggressive back, it's really like being able to relax into that fear. It might not stop the aggression back to someone, but knowing like at the bottom of it, like what your body is saying is I am afraid, and then it goes through all these defense mechanisms. So this is kind of what I would call like the seeking ego. So Ramesh Balsekar, one of my teachers, he used to talk about the ego in the positive, and Eckhart Tolle, another one of my teachers, talked about the ego in the negative. So I'm always a bit dubious about talking about the ego, because Ramesh used to say, you know, you need an ego, you need a sense of self in order to function. And Eckhart would call the ego like all negative aspects of the person. So the negative side of the ego is these unconscious layers. So it's like at the bottom you have fear. So say something makes you afraid, but you respond with aggression, and then you have lots of thoughts blaming that person, hating that person, wanting to get that person out of your life. And to me, that would be the seeking ego, those thoughts and that identification with it, that belief of that person on the surface level. So underneath you feel fear, Your defense is aggression, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing necessarily actually suffering in that. That's a response that's happening, an animal-like response. You know, you're biologically conditioned to be like that. But then there is this delusion of you that has been offended by this person, and this person did something really bad to you, and it's true, your angry stories about them. And they're not actually true. So say if you know, somebody comes up and insults you on the street, you know, swears at you because you walk on the wrong bit of the road or something. So underneath, more than likely what that does is it makes you feel afraid. Like you feel afraid of the person. It's not about not feeling fear. That's a natural biological response that's meant to be there. You know, if a lion comes up, it's like, rah! And you don't feel any fear, then more than likely you won't react, and then the lion eats you. So fear is normal. There might even be trauma in there, and that can even be normal. You know, it might make your body tremble. But then what can happen is the seeking energy, the seeking ego comes in, and it starts telling you a story, and that story is believed. Like that person is a bad person, that person is all these things, and they did this to me, and how dare they, and I'm going to do this back to them, and I'm going to do that back to them. And all of that is getting into seeking energy. And what it's basically doing, or trying to do, is protect you. And what I find is, as you get deeper into non-duality and who you truly are, is these sorts of things happen. There might be an aggressive response back, but then there is a coming back to the underlying feeling. I feel afraid now. I am afraid. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. To me, the person that can stand there and admit they're afraid is the warrior. It's like kick ass, like, yeah, baby. That's what it is to be human. The person that pretends to not be afraid is most probably in some sort of delusion because they want to be something. It could be that there's no fear arises. That sometimes happens, which is always interesting. But a lot of the time it's about they want to be something. They want to be better than the other because they're in another story. They have an image of themselves and they want to be more enlightened than others around them because they want to have more power. And then they begin to start telling themselves in the story, that tell themselves stuff in their head, and they're not really conscious of it again. There's a disconnection from the body. And then there is this going into time and creating a structure of me that you're identified with. So, boo, boo. So to me, being in flow is not being enlightened, it's being yourself. And whatever you are is perfection. It's so perfect. Even if you go into old stories or seeking or feel fear, the key to it though is to always try to come back to what the base of your body feels. And normally it falls into two categories. You feel fear or you're wanting love. And the wanting love is a safety. So they're kind of the same thing, but the wanting love is like the safety part. And then the fear is like the more aversion part. And there's nothing wrong with either of those inherently. But what can happen is lots of seeking can spring off that. You feel fear and you're afraid of feeling fear, so you turn it into aggression, you turn it into spite, you turn it into blame, you turn it into victimization, you turn it into all these stories. Or you're wanting love and you are embarrassed or ashamed by that. You feel like you can't get it and you turn it into all these stories and you become like this condensed person. Like all these layers condense you and make you hard rather than being see-through, which is what it's like to be the experience of the human. You have these feelings and they come and go like clouds in the sky and it's all kind of see-through. When you have all these layers on top of yourself, when you're trying to be something rather than your authentic flowing self, you become hard, your body becomes hard and you hold on to things. And through years and years of investment in this, you become harder and harder and life becomes more and more suffering, because if you become hard and really life is flow, you're always hitting up against stuff. So really everything should be calming and going like a flow, even the pains and the pleasures. But when you have all these identities, it's like something happens and you're hitting against it because you're hard. Because really your experience is that you're empty. Your experience is that things come and go through this vastness. Like there isn't actually a person in that body. There isn't actually a body. There is this consciousness that's looking that doesn't even know where it's looking from. It doesn't even have a location. And all these things are happening in that experience. Which is beautiful. It is beautiful.